Morning, Amy.
Hi, Rusty. We're working on setup.
Great. Thank you very much. Amy, can you hear me?
Oh, sure. Get started. Thanks for making it work.
Morning.
Okay. Jonathan. Our facilitator Rusty joined us via Zoom. Good morning, Rusty. Can you see us?
I can see you. There may be a few that I can't see, but it looks like I see a lot of folks. I can't really recognize folks. My apologies for not being there.
Steve just got quiet. Thank you for joining us via Zoom.
You bet. I'm glad to get to be there in some form.
Started with our multi-group IBB training. I am going to share my screen. If you have a computer, the slides are linked in the invitation.
So Amy, how many people are there in the room this morning?
30.
30. Okay.
Okay, Rusty, I think we're ready. It's not a slideshow. This is just what it looks like. It's a Google.
I don't see the slides. I just see. Yeah.
It's the slides are a PDF. That's how I receive them from Rusty. It says RFS
The invite got updated.
IBB training. Is it in there?
Yeah, okay. The original invite, it was not, it was a Word document and now it's better.
There's an agenda. That's a Word document. So
Yeah. It wasn't there initially, but if you.
I know I just got the slide, so I put them. Yeah. If you refresh your invite, the slides will be there. Everyone ready? Okay, Rusty, I think we are ready.
Well, good morning, everyone. I'm Rusty George, and I just want to run you through the fundamental IBB training this morning. And typically what we do is we get started with a check-in. With probably this many people, doing a check-in in the formal way might take us a lot of time. It'd take us probably at least 30 to 35 minutes. I thought that to expedite things, we could do just a more localized check-in where you check in with somebody next door to you where you're seated. And if that's okay with you guys, if you want to do the full check-in, I'm fine with the whole group. It's really up to you guys.
Okay, I'm going to try to remember to speak on the mic. Will you give me a thumbs up if that at your table, turn and talk check-in? Okay, Rusty, we're going to go for it. Thank you.
Okay, going to go for the full thing. All right. Well, great. If you could advance to that slide.
We're going to do it. Check-in, Rusty.
I'm sorry. Could you repeat that?
We plan to do the at your table.
Okay, great. That sounds good. That'll help. We'll do it at the table. That'll get us going faster. All right. So the next slide, if we could do that. And so you can't show this as a PDF or because it's being shown as a doc and it's sure messed it up.
Stand by for a sec.
Hey, thank you. I just sent a slightly new version of that too, but it's basically the same as the other. I just added a couple slides later. There we go. All right, so when we do a check-in, you're just going to share your name, what your position in the district is. How are you doing today? This is not just the cordial one, but any specifics that might be up about you today that people should know. Any time constraints you have, who's missing may be difficult to do, so I wouldn't get too worried about that. Issues and elephants, probably not something today. Typically, this is something where you have something big going on that you would need to share in order for the day to really be effective. And then finally, what are your expectations that you have for the day? And my question of the day for you was, what was your very first paid job?
Got it.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, everyone.
All right. Well, it's disappointing for me not to get to be there and get to hear all of your amazing first jobs that you got paid for. It's always an interesting question. So just to repeat, my name is Rusty George. I'm your facilitator. I'm struggling a little bit today, but way better than I have been. It's been a really tough last 10 days for my family and then myself coming down with COVID. I've got a daughter and son-in-law with it as well now, but I'm starting to feel a lot better. My expectations today is to, first of all, just recognize all of you for taking the time to commit yourself to interest-based bargaining to support your district, all the employees, the students, the community. It's really a great thing that you've chosen to do, and I really appreciate that from all of you. My first job was actually at 12 years old. I stopped at a place at a nearby outdoor mall that was doing some construction, and I thought it looked interesting. So I asked for a job, and it was at a future big Texan, and I spent 2 weeks surviving hauling construction debris by wheelbarrow, and then finally decided I couldn't take it anymore. But that was my first job. For our agenda today, we'll do the IBB training here first thing this morning, and hopefully I can wrap things up potentially before 10:45. Also, somewhere in that 8:10 to 10:45 range, probably like 9:30-ish. We'll look to take a little short break if people need it. Then we'll get on to the official finance update in the IBB calendar with Christy, Anna, and Amy. And when we finish the training, we'll take a little break too for that. And then after the quick financial update, we'll do interest development breakouts where you break out into your separate teams and roll through the overview of the goal and the process that you'll use. Lunch from 12:15 to 1. Come back after that for your interest development breakouts again, and just kind of finalize things and lay out the next steps and dates. And then each group will check out at the 2 to 2:15 point. Next slide.
Rusty, one moment. We just want to clarify that the training and the finance update will be over this morning. That's what
Yes.
we're doing with all employee groups. We have class
Yes.
BB here. Interest development and that work will be happening only for the certified group.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right, so I just got another little quick question, and this is something that's probably pretty close to what your expectations for the day was, but I'd really like for you to share with someone on your left or right and really focus on what's your real motivation to be a part of interest-based bargaining. What really led you to return to this process after maybe several years, or to just get involved this year? Just take a couple of moments and think about that and share with a neighbor.
Okay, thanks, everyone. We are all very grateful that you are spending your time and your energy. And if you had to write subplans to be gone, we are grateful that you are putting the effort into being here. This is big work and it's important work, and we're excited to dig in with you all.
Excellent. Thank you. All right. So this little slide here is really something that's important for us to keep in mind as we go through this process today of the training. We're really trying to focus a lot on behaviors and skills that relate to working together with people. And one of the things that can cause a really big problem is making assumptions. I know that you may have seen this particular video we're going to click on and show, but I would really like to do it because it helps understand how we build assumptions about events around us and how we can judge things sometimes before we really understand what's going on. So if you could click that link and see if it takes us to YouTube. Hopefully it does. Maybe it's not a live link. Go.
Come on.
AmeriQuest Mortgage, proud sponsor of the NFL.
Watch what blueberries do to your love handles.
Are smoothies a good option?
They're probably one of the biggest poisons known to man.
Oh, that was interesting. Sorry for the technical difficulties, you guys, in sharing these things. So in that video, it kind of moved quickly, but you got the basic idea that something's going on with this man arriving at a location. And one of the things you notice when he arrives, he has to reach up and grab a key. So he doesn't have his own key to this.
Rusty, we can't hear you.
Okay.
Go back.
My audio is on.
Okay. Go ahead.
We're good.
All right. So as I was saying, and normally I like to get a lot of feedback from everybody, but that would be difficult here. But as you watch this gentleman with flowers in his hand, he reaches up and grabs a key. So he doesn't have his own key, is an assumption we can make from watching that. He goes in, he's puts the flowers on the table. He's dressed nicely. He goes about making a meal. And then the cat jumps up, knocks over the marinara sauce, and he quickly grabs the cat to prevent it from spreading it everywhere. And then the girlfriend or whoever this woman is to him walks in and sees him hold a knife with the cat. And I think this is an awesome thing for us to understand how many little pieces go together to get a full view of what's going on. And if you see only one little piece, you will tend to make an assumption that could be completely wrong. And it's really important for us to learn to think about our way of making decisions, drawing conclusions. And to help us with that, if we go to the next slide, is something called the ladder of inference. This is an excellent tool. You can use this every day of your life. And so in this ladder is basically the idea of what are the steps on this ladder that go through to help you take actions in your life. And the very first thing is just like we did, you are to observe and experience things in your life as if you're watching a video, and you're going to collect information from what's there. And then once you're hearing this, one of the things we typically do is we select what we choose to hear and see. We don't always pick up everything, so we're going to choose the things that we think are relevant. We get those, we begin to add meaning to what it is that we selected from our observations. And from that, we make assumptions, and we take that meaning and we create what we think is going on. From that, we will draw conclusions from those assumptions, and it's usually based on what's best for me and those that are immediately around you that you care about. You're going to adopt beliefs based on these conclusions, as these happen all the time in our lives, and they form a way that we have conclusions that support our beliefs. And then finally, we act on those beliefs as if they were proven facts, and we adjust new data to fit the beliefs. So the concept here is that sometimes certain parts of this ladder may need to be revisited, in that you may have made an assumption without actually getting all the data to something, and then you realize that you've maybe had this for a while and it has affected what you've adopted into your belief system and can affect the actions that you take. So I would encourage you to, when this whole training is over, to go back and look through some of these slides and really connect on this process of how we take actions by utilizing this ladder of inference. Next slide, please. All right, so I want to have one more. This will be our last sharing that we have, but I'd like for you to share with somebody next to you, maybe a couple of people around you. What does conflict mean to you, and how do you know you are actually in a conflict? So if you could do that for me, share some things, and then we'll try to pull that together.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Rusty.
You bet. So, this word conflict, you hear it a lot. And, in general, a conflict is a disagreement that may be sustained. It may be something recent that relates to differing beliefs, opinions, needs, interests, goals. There are a variety of factors there. And I think sometimes in society, we build things up to be conflicts when in reality, they are just things that we have as challenges between us that we need to find ways to communicate about. So if you can go to the next slide, see if this slide now. Okay, so this problem-solving chart here is a great way for us to think about this. And I wish I could have heard some of the things that you guys mentioned, but I know that one of the things that happens when we are in conflict or we have a need for a conversation is there's often some stress and anxiety that goes on in this. And sometimes you can get into a situation where you really want to win in a particular situation because you think your needs are greater than somebody else's. And so as a result of this, people work in different ways around crucial conversations or difficult conversations that they might be having. And the chart that was showing just a second there, if we can get back to it, is a problem-solving chart that helps us relate to how we can think about our possible ways to work through difficult conversations and conflicts. There we go. So one of the key things, I recently had a conversation with a neighbor, and there was some talk about legal action in relation to some property and this concept of how that's possible he could use a lawyer and use power to push his way to get what he wanted, but he really wanted to maintain a relationship with his neighbor and not have to turn to such an action. And that's really a challenge here. And so on the horizontal x-axis, you see this concern for relationship versus on the vertical axis, a concern for the outcome. And so if you're in the low concern for the relationship and low concern for the outcome, then you might want to just avoid the particular conflict that's there and not have a conversation about it at all. Or perhaps you really value the relationship far more than the outcome, and you would choose to just accommodate, go along with whatever the other party wants because you really value that relationship. If you were to go over to the vertical axis, you can see the opposite, to where you have a very high concern for the outcome, but you don't care about the overall relationship. And there you're going to be in a competitive mode, and your goal is to win. And you will use power, any other tools that you can, so that you can win. And perhaps even in that win, it might be a way for you to get back at the other party. So you see that word disunity there. Now, if you go to the top right, where you see you have a high concern for relationship and a high concern for the outcome, now you're looking for unity and you're looking to collaborate, to work together. Now you're looking at what are the mutual interests that we can find and mutual solutions that will give us a win-win. This collaborative process is very time-consuming. It takes a lot of work to reach solutions, but in the end, it creates generally a better outcome and certainly maintains a relationship. Now, oftentimes we think that when we hear of something going on where there's a conflict, we use the word compromise all the time. Well, the other party just needs to compromise. If they would compromise, it would be, okay, what I've provided as a possible solution is totally fair. And compromise is difficult because one person's definition of fair is not anywhere necessarily near somebody else. So compromise always leaves tension in the fact that if you know you're going to compromise, both parties may feel right off the bat that they're going to lose something. That doesn't mean that's not a part sometimes that has to happen, but if there's really good collaboration, there's less of a feeling of loss and more of a feeling of gain for the parties. Next slide, please. Now, I recently was with a bunch of family, and I ended up getting into a conversation with a brother-in-law who's an attorney, and So we got into a discussion that was something that was fairly controversial a bit. And I had told my wife I would make sure that I did not get too argumentative. And what ended up happening is our conversation became a discussion mode. And in a discussion mode is where you really aren't too worried about the other person's point of view. You really want to win and you want to get your point of view across, because maybe it's something that you thought about for a while. And for me, I can get a little elevated all of a sudden, and it's not as positive a conversation as what we want to have in collaboration. We want to have dialogue. And the real reason that I brought this slide in is that I want you to work to be actively engaging your own mind in thinking about what you are saying, what are you doing in the dialogue, so that you can work to get a common pool of meaning, and that we work to listen to each other as best as possible. And I'll try to share some tools with you later to help you in that concept of how we listen actively. Next slide, please. So here's some skills where the reflection part comes into place. And if I had been able to do this at the time with my conversation with my brother-in-law, it didn't go horribly, but it didn't go the way I wanted. If I could have just slowed down my thinking and really thought about what's going on with my thoughts, why am I thinking in a certain way that are affecting my actions, trying not to jump leaps of abstraction, like somebody will make a comment, and rather than really thinking about their comment, you just jump right into an assumption based on your previous beliefs, and you get yourself all twisted around. So thinking about how we think really makes us more aware of our assumptions, and we can get richer understanding. We can value our differences and build trust. And I had this great opportunity with a brother-in-law who's 82, I may never see again in my life. And I had this opportunity to build a much deeper understanding between the two of us. And instead, I just was in discussion mode. So when we think about being in dialogue, we want to be inquiring. We want to get information from the other person. So we're trying to ask questions and then pause, paraphrase, inquire, and then ask questions that are open-ended to see what information we can get, to try to be non-judgmental about how people feel and think about things, and to really listen deeply, attend fully, try not to go shooting off on some sidewalk, birdwalk thing, or oftentimes we get into our own thing and we just start talking about our own situations rather than being curious about the other person and not being certain about ourselves, but really being more interested in the other person. So I encourage you and challenge you to try and think about things in our dialogues that we have around the challenging issues that we will face. Next slide. So I was looking back over books last night that I have and kind of looking at conflict and so forth. And really the book that is critical to changing the way in which we think about negotiations nowadays was something from the Harvard Negotiation Project, and it's called Principled Negotiations. The book is called Getting to Yes. I think it's in its 3rd edition. If you've not read this, I would highly encourage you to read this book. It is not very long. It is not difficult to read, and you will find it very helpful to everything in your life. Because ultimately, when we work with other human beings, we're going to be in negotiations. If you've raised kids, you've been in negotiations. If you're teaching kids, you're in negotiations. If you're working with other people in any way, shape, or form, there are constant negotiations going on. And these folks worked hard and felt like they came up with 4 key principles to principled negotiation that really make it easier to work together. The first one is separating the people from the problem, really focusing your ideas, your interest around the problem. Second, you want to focus on your interests, not your positions. And in this case, interest is meaning, what are your motivations around a particular issue that's going on, and not a preformed position that you have in your mind. Because if you approach it with a position, it's going to make it very hard for you to accept or understand what's going on with the other side. Finally, once you've shared as many interests around the particular issue, you try to invent as many options as possible that provide mutual gains before you decide what to do. So it's a brainstorming of giving options, and those options are looking for mutual gains. And finally, the key is you have to evaluate those options with some specific criteria. You have to have an objective standard to know that when you reach a solution and the solution is implemented, you have some way to evaluate that to see if it is actually fulfilling the mutual gains that you worked for it to get. This is fundamentally the basic outline of what interest-based bargaining is. Next slide, please. Please take a moment. I don't know if you're going to be able to fully read this because of the screen. Here we go. If you would just read this, it's going to be 2 slides. So I'll just be quiet and let you read through this. You can roll up when people are finished with that page.
We're going to be restarting the presentation, but
All right, thank you.
see it drop.
Stay, are you able to share your screen on the Zoom?
Sure. Been so long since I've done this. I rehearsed with Google Meet to try and practice. It feels like I'm in a flashback back to 2021 when I was trying to teach students live in my class, all masked up while I was teaching students online. All the constant technical difficulties. I sure appreciate everybody's support and patience here. Hopefully, if you got this up yourself, you can read this second page that's here. And I apologize, I just can't recall how to make this go to straight full screen for me, so we'll just keep it rolling here. apologize, I can't see your eyes and so forth to know if you finished reading, but I'm going to make an assumption that you did. And what I really want to point out is what was at the top of or bottom of the previous page, where it talks about how, unlike problem-solving strategies and interest-based strategies, based on two assumptions. And that first one is that if you're going to have an effective solution to problems, that you need all affected parties involved in that decision. And not only are they involved in the decision, they're involved in determining how that is implemented. And those two things are really key. And oftentimes the implementation part can be the most difficult. And then the second one is the idea that's key to collaboration is that you are assuming that the parties are going to be in a relationship. They're going to work with each other. They're going to work to continue that relationship, and that's a critical part. And in that, trust is such a big aspect of how you can keep this going. So I encourage you to keep yourselves working as a team together to constantly be sharing so that you can maintain that trust and keep your relationship going. There have been studies done that really show that interest-based bargaining does create very quality and more sustainable solutions than more traditional zero-sum bargaining, where one side wins and the other doesn't. This diagram is a way to look at what style, what role of parties there is between interest-based and positional. So take a moment to look over that and see things that stand out to you. So as you go through this, you can start to see some clear differences between the two ways of dealing with negotiations. And I like the concept of the goal being that it's a wise outcome reached efficiently and amicably rather than just victory. In fact, one of my favorite things as a facilitator is at the end of a long, hard process of trying to find mutual gains for parties and to have an actual commitment and decision made, and to see everybody celebrating together and encouraging each other from the hard work that they've done. And I've seen tears in a lot of these processes, and it's a very, very stressful thing. One of the other things that's really key is to see each other as problem solvers and to be soft on people and hard on problems. It's really the problems that we're focusing on. We're not trying to get anyone. We're really not going to be locked into positions. We want to really focus on our motivations rather than what our positions are. We're not looking for one-sided gains, and we're going to look to use these objective criteria rather than just saying my way is right and that's what we have to do. So here are things that an interest-based strategy is not, what it is and is not. I would wager as you look through this list and have been a part of interest-based bargaining before, that you might have seen some times where you wanted a quick decision, or the group tried to jump to a quick decision, or you saw ultimatums or people butting heads. All these things can happen. And what we're trying to keep in mind is that we're looking at what are the key things that make interest-based bargaining successful. Creative solutions are critical. We want to have better decisions and not just jump on the first ones that come along. We're going to work to tweak and finesse our agreements. We're looking for understanding. I think that the biggest thing that was my challenge when I negotiated for about 10 years was really learning to accept and believe in the work that the group is capable of doing, and that when you put your heads together, you can do a lot more than when you're not together. And being trustworthy is critical, and really pulling together and supporting each other. So this slide is one that shows the actual process of interest-based bargaining so that you can really get a better feel of the whole process together, especially those of you that may not have been fully involved. So we start with the story component. And so the outer circle are the key process pieces of interest-based bargaining. And under each one of those on the sides in bold are key behaviors that we need to focus on so that we can support the inner part of this diagram, which is the folks that are working together and staying in a strong relationship to move forward. And all of these things are trying to support that. So the story is where once you've developed issues, or as you guys describe them, the specific interests that you want to work on, the goal is to tackle each one of these and in detail clarify, analyze what is going on in this situation, the who, what, where, and how from everyone's perspective. Even though you guys here are individuals, you come representing constituents, and part of the key aspect of this process is to represent as many constituents' points of view around particular interests that you are going to work on to try and solve. The behavior parts is to focus on issues, not on people. You want to communicate what's going on, to describe things, and don't accuse when you describe. It's just the facts that you're really trying to get out so that all of the parties involved can have mutual understanding around those. We will do this by rotating one person at a time around the group so that everyone has an equal opportunity to share their voice. And when we reach a point where people are beginning to pass, because you can choose to pass at any time, then once there's a lot of passes, then we'll use cards. I can't see if you guys have your name cards, but we'll have name cards, and you can stick those up, and we'll go around until everybody's exhausted the information that they have. We next move on to interests, and what we're talking about here is what are our motivations? So the motivations to solve a particular problem, and it answers the question why. Why do we want to fix this particular situation that we see the district in? Here we're going to focus on these motivations and not on our positions. The other big one is to understand all of the interests that are being presented, what everybody's motivations are, and don't judge them, accept them, and try to understand where people are coming from. Once we've gotten all those by using that same process of going around a table, then we're going to shift into options mode. This is where we're going to brainstorm as many possible solutions. How are we going to connect the motivations to solve the challenges to what the challenge is? When we're doing these, we are not going to be evaluating and committing. So this is where you just have to let the group go free and come up with many different ideas without shaking your head negatively, shrugging your shoulders, just letting them go so that we can keep moving to get as many particular options as possible so we can meet mutual gains for everyone. Once we've completed that process, and oftentimes we might streamline them a little bit, but typically we just get them laid out. We go to the evaluation process, and now we start to really look at all of them, and we want to analyze them against the motivations, the interests that we had, and objective measures of how the options value is going to answer this question of how well does it meet the gains for all the parties. And in this one, there are a lot of things, there are a lot of tricks we can use to do this to help us more effectively see it. The big behaviors here are to respect the role and responsibilities of others. I found this early on in my time negotiating, one of the most important things when you go back to thinking about how you think about situations. Here is where you really have to understand everybody's role in the district, their responsibilities, to see how these options are meeting those needs of those people. And then finally, seeking to meet the mutual interests that the parties have, but also separate interests, because there's going to be plenty of mutual interests, but there will be separate. How do we pull those things together? And finally, once we've narrowed down all the options and gotten ourselves set up with what we want to lay out, we then choose what we're going to commit to. And this is the consensus and supporting the selected options. And it says, will we, and the key thing here is to know your alternatives to what's going on. This is the classic BATNA idea, the best alternative to negotiated agreement. Sometimes you need to understand what that is to figure out where the best place to be is. And finally, in the commitment, we use consensus. We'll use thumbs for that, and I have a slide for that in a moment. And then finally, the really hard part at the end of this is oftentimes by the time you get to a commitment point, you can be very worn out, but then you have to build your action plan and who's going to do what, when, and where to solve the problem. What are the systematic things that are going to go on to be able to implement things the very best? And so this is a challenging part, and that can often take work beyond the actual process. At any point in this, we can back up to maybe we didn't get certain things in the story and we could go put those in. So this is the basic flow of things in the process. And I've gone and broken down each one of these that just has a little bit more detail to them. And please be sure anytime you guys have a question of any kind that you stop me and I'm happy to answer the question. So you see this now in more detail. We're fully exploring the issues or the problem by describing everything that's happened. We want everybody to contribute pieces from their point of view and constituents. We're focused on issues, not people, and describing things and not accusing. When we're saying things, we want to avoid saying, you did this or you did that. The you word can oftentimes have a bit of bite to it. So we're trying to really focus on just the issue, the interest. Again, you see that it's all about motivations behind solving the problem. We want to hear everybody's interests. We want to focus on those interests and not on positions. And we want to understand those interests, meaning what we really want is we want empathy for everyone's point of view, and we're trying not to judge them. Remember, you can understand someone's point of view without having to fully accept them as necessarily your point of view, but you certainly can understand them and see how they could be helpful in solving a problem. We're going to brainstorm for the options. We want as many as possible. We're not going to judge or evaluate those. We will then switch to evaluation. We might use a criteria graph to where we can use a little spreadsheet and see how well aspects of the options meet certain criteria that we establish. We can go back and really see which interests play the most important role in trying to find out how well a solution is going to meet the needs for the interests. We want to respect the role and responsibilities of others and seek mutual and separate interests. We then will commit, and we'll use thumbs for this. And we're going to support and ask questions for clarification, explain your concerns in this process of commitment. And then finally, we have that challenge of implementing everything and thinking in a larger systematic way. I know that oftentimes from doing work with many districts is implementation 1 year, the way it's thought out, it ends up not working out exactly the way it was intended. And so the next year it's brought back and there are some small tweaks to rework certain things to make it be more effective for all employees, for the students, and so forth. Okay, I'm going to go past these because we've just really hammered this. I would take time to look at these. I would say also an important thing in interest-based bargaining is that you always have the ability to say no. But if you say no, you have a responsibility to explain the objection that you have in terms of the interest that you have. So you're not just having to go along and always say yes, you're trying to work together to reach the best solutions. The brainstorming can be really challenging, but one of the things that when we're brainstorming is to try and build on other people's ideas rather than just judging them and really thinking about the different viewpoints as you build them. Here's some specific criteria that are helpful in evaluation. Is the solution going to be legal? Are there financial resources to support it? Can human resources support it? What are the time resources? Does the constituents support the thing? We want to analyze and evaluate them. And are they appropriate? Are they objective and variable? It's not a yes, no, or in, out. It's really, does it fit everybody's interest best as possible? And then is it appropriate for the issue and make sense to people who've not been a part of the process? Oftentimes, once you put it out there, do all the constituents really understand what's going on with this particular solution that you end up reaching when you're going to work to get to your commitment? So here's some more words to help you: simple, efficient, fair, equitable, affordable, flexible, ratifiable, common practice. And we're evaluating each option against these criteria. In the end, we can tweak them down and get to a final thing that we then choose to commit. So when we commit, we want each member to be able to say that they understand the points of view that were represented. They believe that everybody understands their point of view. You support this particular decision. It was reached openly and fairly, and it's the best solution at the time. And the key guidelines here are listening to others, making sure everybody participates. We have to have mutual understanding of all the information that is there. That number 4, don't agree too quickly. Make sure you ask questions to understand things. And we're not trying to bargain or trade support, and we're not trying to vote initially. In the end, we use our thumbs as our vote, but we're trying to really just get as much information and look at differences as strength. We want to avoid arguing blindly for your own ideas, and we want to seek mutual gains. Finally, when we do the consensus, here's where our thumbs is. The idea is if all the members put their thumbs up for the agreed upon solution, and it's really important to have that solution clearly written out. We've gone through all these things, everybody understands it, and then your thumb up is you're 100% for this. If your thumb is sideways, you can live with it for now and you're not going to sabotage it. Oftentimes, if your thumb is sideways, there may still be some questions or just some areas that you don't feel are going to work perfect, but you don't have any other solution that's better. And then finally, if you have a thumbs down where you're against the proposal, you must indicate an interest not being met and provide alternatives. I have seen thumbs down before and seen groups work through with the person that has the thumb beginning to share their interests that are not being met and their concerns, and the team will work with that person and they work to start evaluating a little bit more. And oftentimes small tweaks or just better understanding from the person with the thumbs down can get everyone to the thumbs up or the thumbs sideways. And I really encourage you, if you are a thumb sideways person or 100% up, when you leave the room, you are out there to support this solution to the best of your ability and not sabotage it. How's everybody holding up at this point? Can we go just a little bit longer? I don't have a ton of slides left.
We have some thumbs up in the room.
Okay, great. Well, these last few things that I want to run through are really specific types of actions and behaviors that are very effective when we think of this term active listening. I became pretty infatuated with the concepts this gentleman, Chris Voss, puts out in his book, The Art of Negotiation, and Never Split the Difference. And he's a former FBI negotiator. Perhaps some of you have seen him. Maybe you've even read his book. I find his book a lot easier to read than the Getting to Yes, though that is an easy read book. But he just provides a lot of great explanations of hostage negotiation situations that led to the FBI building up a way to negotiate, utilizing what he now put into his own words and now has a business around it. And his business is called the Black Swan Group. And it's a concept called tactical empathy. So the concept of tactical empathy is really trying to understand and acknowledge the emotions of the other parties by vocalizing those emotions. I think this is something that is just incredibly helpful. It will build rapport with the other party. You will gain insights into the counterpart's perspective. The key to it is being active in your listening, really working to have empathy, which means to understand how somebody else feels. And your understanding doesn't mean that that's the way you feel, but you are recognizing that you understand them and really trying to use all your best emotional intelligence skills. And I will tell you oftentimes that when you're tired, when things are challenging and intense in negotiations, it can be very difficult to not let anger or fear or anxiety get in the way. So these techniques can really help you focus in a specific way. Labeling is a technique that I'll show you next. Dynamic silence is something that you've all used in your life. I'm sure you've all done mirroring before. We're very familiar with paraphrasing people. But in this last part, summary and open-ended questions is a powerful way to look to get a that's right from somebody so that they really realize that you understand where they're coming from. Pardon me. This is going to really help to establish trust and open communication channels.
Rusty, do you want to advance your slides?
Yes, ma'am. Pardon me while I cough here. All right. So a label is a specific technique where you've been listening to a person. You're identifying how they're feeling about something or sentiments that they may have, but maybe they didn't directly say them. And so a label is something where you use a starting phrase of, it seems like, it sounds like, it feels like, it looks like. And then you're going to state something that you heard them saying. So it seems like planning time is important to you. It sounds like you have a place you want to start. I'm back in the classroom again, and I had a student just flip out in class, right at the beginning of class, throw out an F-bomb. And so we went outside in the hall, and this young lady just had a lot going on, and I just tried to listen to what she was saying. And I used these labels over and over to try and help her understand that I was listening to her and that the way she was feeling was important to me. Now, mirroring is something where We do mirroring all the time, especially when we're with groups of our peers that we're very comfortable with. And it comes from neuro-linguistic programming. And really, it's where there's a resonance built between people, where what you're really doing is you start imitating others to create a sense of mutual understanding. When you're with your friends in situations, this goes on without you thinking about it at all. It helps to generate some trust and a connection at a subconscious level. The basic idea of it as a strategy is when you've maybe used a label or two, you can repeat the last 1 to 3 words somebody is saying, or words that stand out the most important is what they said. And one of the most important things that Chris Voss talks about is when you're using these techniques, you want to use your late night FM DJ voice. You want to use a really mellow voice that doesn't have any sort of judgment or intensity to it. So you're using this as an inquisitive tone so that the people feel like you're actually understanding them, which is what your goal is. The paraphrasing, I'm sure you've done before, where you're restating somebody's words in your own words. And that means that to them, you have listened to what's going on and what you are saying is important. So you could summarize what your counterpoint outlined about their legacy organization's need for digital transformation, as they believe that modernization could significantly improve their current performance. There are lots of ways to do this, and it's just incredibly important. Give me 1 second, take another sip of my honey tea here. This dynamic silence concept is incredibly important. I was just listening to an interview with the gentleman who at 15 went touring around with rock stars and started interviewing them. And he talks about an interview with Chris Christopherson, and he asked him a question, and he decided rather than continuing on, he would just stop and sit there and wait. And he sat and waited somewhere 10, 15 seconds. And he thought maybe Chris Christopherson thought the question was stupid. And then all of a sudden, Chris Christopherson started answering the question in a lot of detail, and then went on to share something about he and Bob Dylan were going to be producing and releasing a new album that they had made in Mexico. Nobody else knew about this. And he got a big break in Rolling Stone. You're probably familiar with this person. So oftentimes, if we just take time and let people sit on something, they will begin to talk about it. Well, one of the greatest little shows I've seen recently is called The Residents, and it's about a murder in the White House. And the detective in this is incredible at using dynamic silence. Oftentimes, people shall say one thing and just sit there, and they just start opening up with all of these things. So take your time and let people have an opportunity to tell you more so they really feel like you understand them. And finally, this is a great way to put everything together. And this is where you're going to give a comprehensive overview of everything that your counterpart shares. It's essentially the sum of the paraphrasing and labels that you've used in the conversation. So you're going to paraphrase it, and then at the very end of it, you're going to put a label on it. So here's an example. They believe that modernizing could significantly improve their current performance. It sounds like that would increase your production. Now, if you've done this well through the whole process, you're looking to get what Chris Voss calls the "that's right" from your counterpart. Now, I've been in discussions with people or dialogue with people before, and I've tried to get them to that point. And sometimes it's hard. I worked hard to get this young lady that was wigging out on me, but her stress was so great that she needed far more time than just standing in the hall. And so get her to the guidance counselor and those conversations, then we're able to help her. You just have to learn to be patient and really make sure that you hear what people are saying. One of the most important things I ask you to do in the entire process is to ask clarifying questions. These clarifying questions should be open-ended. If you just ask simple questions that don't allow a person to answer, if it's just a yes or no question, it doesn't get you as far. So you're trying to ask questions that begin with what, how, when, and occasionally why. Why can be difficult because why really tries to get at somebody's internal motivation. And if you don't have a close relationship, that can sometimes make them feel judged and like, why would you choose to do that? That can have a judgment thing. So that's one you want to avoid using too much. You want to allow your counterpart to think more about their motivations and not just give a yes or no. So question like, what if we can't meet the deadline? And then boom, you're going to sit there quietly and not say anything to allow them to think. The ideal with tactical empathy is oftentimes if you do these skills properly, people will begin to generate solutions in relation to what the challenges are. And it can be a very effective technique. I believe that is my last slide, and my voice seems to be fading away to nothing. And that went much faster than what I thought it would go, but I really didn't want to, in this scenario, take too much time, as I know your time is very valuable today. I don't know if you might have some questions out there, and I do actually see you got your cards, which is fantastic. If you have a question about anything that popped up for you, perhaps you could raise a card and we could roll through that.
Thanks, Rusty. We're going to get going with some questions. Jean has, I see you. Jean has a question.
Yes. I can't hear Jean.
Hi, Rusty.
Hi, Jean.
I am wondering if in this process where transparency around information is and what an imbalance of information, so asymmetry in the contextual building, what is the best way to ask and like find that out in a way that it feels that collaborative way, especially when people have access to such different kinds of information? Because I know I'm a masterclass girly too. I like my General Stanley McChrystal, and he talks about the I gotta smile. The radical transparency of that and making sure everyone knows all of it and how all these different teams in a wartime scenario, it takes time to set up. But once they do have all the information, they can move more quickly and efficiently. So how do we bring that into the conversation when it's like, I'm not sure, let me find out. And then we're a little nervous because we're still building towards that sense of collaboration. Any tips on building that environment and engendering that trust?
That's a great question. I see that challenge a lot. I've been in that challenge before as well. And I remember having a challenge about a financial presentation in my early time negotiating. And I went to the facilitators during a break and said, I'm confused. I don't feel like I'm getting all the information, and what can I do? And his response was simple. He said, you can continue to ask clarifying questions as long as is needed to get the information that you would like. The challenge is asking it in an open way so that it does not feel that you're attacking someone. The other challenge here is that larger trust issue. Hopefully, as this team works together, as you have your leadership teams working together, you begin to trust the information that is coming to you. And both sides have an obligation to be as open about information as possible. Because if you don't have mutual understanding around the information that's there, it makes it very difficult to get to solutions. So trying to think about describing what's going on with the particular issue and not looking at it from the person that you think may have the information. It's really about the information. So you're looking to be assertive without being aggressive. And that is a challenge, but using that late night FM DJ voice to ask a question and avoiding the you in a question can really help you get more information. Did that help, Gene, at all?
Yes, thank you so much, Rusty.
You're welcome. You know, it's really important that both teams, when you're working, if you know you're going to form straw committees around particular topics that you're working on, and that you're working to find the best information possible that everybody's going to really work to agree upon, and then that's going to help you get your solutions better. Remember that, you know, the administration, they have legal representation, they have their financial expert, they have CASB, and then in the certified group or the education association group, classified, certified, you have support of the local UNISERV, you have the CEA. When it comes to financial things, all financial things are audited and released by the district. You can find all the financial information for every single district in the state at the CEA's website. It may be a nightmare to get through all that, but that information is there. And I know that it's important to keep maintaining trust. And the other thing I would say that's really critical, and I can't believe that I made it through the whole presentation without saying it, but one of the key norms in interest-based bargaining is to assume good intent. This should always be in your mind. You are assuming good intent from all parties as they are sharing information. Next question.
Questions?
Observations, things you've seen in the process, anything that you feel you need to have. Yes, sir.
Hey, Rusty.
Hey, how you doing?
Question is, do you or does anyone in the room have good examples of this process? When I look outward, I don't feel I see any good examples in current events or in the news lately. Are there places we can look to see this process working in action?
Yeah, so in terms of seeing it live or seeing viewpoints from it and so forth, I know that there are many districts around the state and around the country that utilize this. I can share, I think I have in reference 2 reports of people that have done studies to try and see what's going on in school districts utilizing this, especially when it became more prevalent in the early 90s. And so there is statistical data around this. I know that it is possible, just as right now, others outside of this room are watching this process, that it is possible to watch other school districts using this to get a feel for how that works for them. And certainly I work with Garfield RE2. I have in the past worked with Montrose and in Canyon City Schools, and they use the process there. And it can be a bumpy road, but I find that if they go through the quality training, they work hard together, they are able to actually generate effective, wise outcomes that benefit all the employees and students in the community. I will tell you, though, that you don't see it much very well in the politics world these days. And oftentimes we don't really get to see what goes on in real negotiations, like it mentioned in that short, brief description, that it has been used in a lot of world analysis ways, but it's not something you typically see stories about. Other questions? And I will find those studies and I'll stick them on the shared drives for everybody so you can look those over. You know, one of the slides that I I didn't have in this is it's a trust balloon. And one of the things that we need to really recognize when we work together in groups is trust is a complex situation. There are many factors that affect it, and in things like reliability of the people involved, predictability, how much honesty is going on, how much benevolence is there amongst those. You have to make yourself vulnerable in a trust situation. And oftentimes what happens is all it takes is a little deceit somewhere or harm in some way to poke a hole in that balloon of trust, and it can lose air. And the key is to really work hard on those key elements of trust to make it be as open and as possible. And I know from working with this district and others, I see all members being genuinely open to trying to share the best information and do what is best for the district. And it's just a challenging process to find those interests that work well together, your motivations that are common, that will build the best solutions. And it can be challenging, and you should understand that people are going to say hard things. And as long as they say those hard things, by focusing on the issues and not the people, you can move forward.
We're practicing
Any other-
dynamic silence here. Any questions?
Yeah.
More questions? Isn't wait time uncomfy? Okay, I think that's it for us, Rusty. Oh, Kendall.
This might be a question more for you, Amy, or for you, Anna, and it might, maybe we're getting to this later, so feel free to tell me to pause. But it might be good, because I know this case came up last year at Certified, to clarify like who's in the room and why we're in the room, because we didn't do that in the beginning. And just in terms of like who's on Certified and Classifieds here, and I know admin's not here because Rusty doesn't facilitate them. And maybe that's coming later.
I think that's good. We can do a mid-morning round of introductions. Is that what you're asking for, Kendall?
No.
Just who's represented?
Yeah.
And why?
How are big structures working?
Yeah, I think that we might get to this, Anna, when we look at like the year-long IBB calendar, but it was a pitch that I made to the certified 4x3 group to try a combined training with Rusty for the classified and the certified group, so that we are all here getting the same information at the same time.
No, that go ahead.
Well, there was a process question too, I think, wasn't made clear to me, but like we're dividing up after this training, and then certified staying here, classified is regrouping to do the process at a different time. Okay, cool. Well, I would also just like to say, like, to all the classified staff, like, just like welcome to this process, and like we're really excited. Like we've been for years like hoping that it could get started. And you know, if you've never been a part of it, like it's really cool. Like it does work the way that he described if you're open to it. And you know, and I hope that your negotiations go really well, because it's been a long time coming that everyone's been able to come to the table. So yeah, I just wanted to say welcome. And
Adam, thanks for your insight. So one of the things to know too is as you do your breakouts, this will be an opportunity to be with your teammates and begin to start addressing the particular challenges that you want to set forth as the key interests to work on with your team. And I know that Amy and Anna will go through that process with you. And certainly the certified team is very used to doing this, and the classified team can work on that. The key to really having things dialed is focusing, as I presented, I think it was last year now. I'm a little lost in time in my mind, but I did do a classified presentation and talked about the types of things that you want to look to work on. Obviously, wages and benefits are always a huge part, but what are some of the working conditions and personnel policies that might need addressing to make systems work more efficiently for everyone involved? Those are the types of things that you'll be focusing on. And then when we actually meet to negotiate, the key thing is there'll be a little bit of a team, kind of a group growth together activity that allows us to all be in the same place in addition to just the check-in. And it really begins to build that collaborative process. There's sort of a forming of your group, norming of the group, and then you're storming through things until you're finally at a point where you're accomplishing the things you want to get to.
Okay, Rusty, I think we're running pretty ahead of schedule. It might be a good time to take a break, and then our next thing on the agenda is a finance update with Christy and Anne. So, Anna, do you think 9:50? Okay, Rusty, we're gonna break till 9:50.
All right, take a good break, stretch your legs, visit some
Okay, thanks everyone. Anna is going to present some slides. They are also linked in the agenda.
Okay, crew, are we ready? That's going to be better. Okay, this slide deck is linked in our agenda. And we wanted to go through a couple of things as we do a kickoff, and this was also helpful to have certified and classified together. So feel free to follow along with the slide deck. We're going to end with the question, what do our IBB teams need in terms of information around budget, finance, critical information as we kick off this process? So keep a running list of notes if you feel like, oh, we would like more information on that. We'd love to see more there as we go through. So Christy Chacoin is here, so I'm going to kick over to have Christy introduce herself, and then we'll talk about the agenda and jump right in.
Thanks, Anna. First of all, I just wanted to note is that I would usually be with you today, the whole day. We are in an unusual situation with our audit. We have a new comptroller we're really excited about, Paulette. She's doing a great job. The only situation we had going on is that she had some other things she had to do this time of year, and that was part of, she already had that plan before I hired her. And so I'm pretty much doing like the whole audit right now and meeting all those deadlines. And so it's an unfortunate situation, but I know we're going to have a really great team moving forward. And I really appreciate your patience with me as we're just trying to make sure, first of all and foremost, that we get all of our numbers accurately and very quickly to the board and to all of our stakeholders. So, so just trying to prioritize a couple of different things on the plate right now. And so if you go to the, do we want to, you just went through all of those kind of.
Yeah, well, let me just run through quick. What we're going to do is give you kind of a October 30th forecast on current year, future year budget, at least what we're starting to look at. We want to talk about fair share. We were tasked last year at the end of IBB 24-25 to spend some time this summer on bringing forward a proposal for a Fair Share 2.0. So want to bring it to this group. We've shared it with all of the certified classified admin IBB leadership teams over the last couple of months, but wanted to bring to this group for input, feedback as we pilot this year. Want to look at, we were also tasked this summer with coming up with a calendar proposal of how our 3 IBB teams are going to work together with the Health Insurance Collaborative Solutions team. So I want to run that by everybody. I think that'll help answer some of the questions that came up earlier around process. Again, these are like first drafts of kind of revised process here. Amy will give us an update on the Health Insurance Collaborative Solutions team that's been meeting already this year and what that crew's been working on. And then we have some, I think, really interesting updates of an exploratory committee related to a mill levy override. So we'll talk through those. So let's jump right in. And Christy's going to walk us through kind of financial forecast, where we are. And of course, as you all remember from last year, often we're talking about multiple years when we do these updates, because we're tying up a past year, we're living in the current year, but we're also looking ahead.
Thanks. I just can't quite see it from here. I don't want to turn my back to you guys. So I was like, okay, I'm just going to make sure I have it in front of me here. Well, for the 24-25 audit, like I mentioned just a few minutes ago, this is audit season. We're working on it, getting everything closed out, and the audit results finalized here shortly. I've got to get them finalized by the week of November 10th is really where we're at, because we've got our financial audit the November 17th through the 26th, and then the board will receive the final audit report on December 17th, which is on time. That'll be a week or a month earlier than the prior year and 2 months earlier than the year before that. So we're getting on track with our timelines, which is really awesome. Really excited about that. The one thing I'll say is we don't have the final results yet, but the good news that we've got is that with some of the stop loss payments that we were really fighting the health insurance companies for, we did receive those. And so that was roughly 800,000. So that was one good piece of news that we've got potentially one time. But other than that, I need to really scrub the books to get you the rest of the financial results. And I want to make sure that everything is completely scrubbed and reconciled before we do that. Okay, looking at the update, for 25-26, we have a decline in students of 133 compared to budget. Okay, that's not necessarily good news. And looking at the impacts, it's about 550,000 for this year, for 25-26. But then looking into 26-27, remember the legislature was considering and recommending actually to move from a 4-year averaging to 3-year averaging. And so that could have a significant impact on our 26-27 budget beyond this 550,000. That's just the first hit that we're going to get from these reduced students because we are now in declining enrollment each year. And so it's going to start to snowball a little bit on that. And so we are looking at lower funding potentially for 26-27. That doesn't include, however, any sort of increases that the state might give us. So the good news is that we should be getting the governor's budget request here in November. Pretty soon. So in the first week in November is usually when that comes out. And then we'll have some better information on that. But the student enrollment is a piece of bad news. But I guess the good news is I'm really grateful for Octavio and his team, for Ben and all the work that they did in really trying to get our free and reduced lunch count students up. That's going to increase our at-risk kids. And so there's some hope there that maybe we can get some additional funding or at least maintain our funding because we were looking at a potential funding clip there. So thank you for that work for you and your team. That's huge.
Christy, can you quickly just explain the averaging?
Mhm.
Some people are not talking about it, but not.
Yeah. So explaining the averaging is the way that this works is so that school districts don't have this huge funding cliff in one year. The legislature in the past history used to have what's called 5-year averaging. So then what they would do is if you had an enrollment reduction one year, it would be averaged with the last 5 years before you would get a funding reduction. So that would be averaged with higher years. It used to be a 5-year averaging. Then it went down to 4 for 25-26. And now they're looking at moving it to 3. So what that does is it reduces the amount of time until we actually see the full effect of not having those students in our funding formula, if that makes sense. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Any questions on that? We're good? Okay. I know the funding formula is it's just beyond the beyond, but there's little pieces and parts that are really important to understand. So thank you. Okay. Let's see here. We do have some additional overages that we're projecting for 25-26 in expenditures because we had a real limited ability to put any contingency in our budget. So as we needed a special ed kid because there was a kiddo that came into the district and those kind of items, we have had to try to absorb those costs that were unavoidable. I will have more information on that definitely as we get our updates and move forward in the year. Looking at the state forecast, we just talked about that. Boy, we've got lots of good news. Looking at the potential of a recession, there's also some funding cliffs at the state level that they have been kicking the can on that are going to be hitting us this year potentially. So I'm really waiting with bated breath on that November report from the governor's office, and we should be getting that in the next week. So that'll be a very important piece of data to at least start us with the next year. Okay. And then health insurance forecast, that's more of what Amy, did you want to talk about that or just?
Sure. Okay. This 8 to 15% is very much an estimate, but I did attend the CEBT renewal meeting for many people. They're doing open enrollment right now for a January through December calendar year enrollment period. And this is sort of the averages that folks saw at that meeting. So I'm taking that to be a leading indicator of what our insurance rate increases could be.
Okay. Thanks, Amy. Okay, so Anna, did you want to start talking about fair share?
Yeah, I mean, I want to pause though real quick. If folks have any questions for Christy or Amy on this current, I mean, you can tell it's pretty gray. It's not, nothing's super concrete yet. But any questions on the financial forecast info before we shift? Yeah, Lisa.
I'll need a mic. Goes to you, but I was just wondering about the $550,000 dollar impact for about 133 students fewer than we were expecting. That comes out to about $4,000 per kid, but I have heard that the actual dollar amount per kid is more like 16,000. Can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, that's really, that's a great question. Thank you. And that's how the student enrollment averaging works, is that we only get the impact on those kids for 1 year. And so our total funding per student on the total program funding formula is $12,630 roughly. So that's about the amount of money we would get if we had a full decline. If there was no averaging, we would see that dollar for dollar. But because we have a 4-year averaging, it takes off that pressure in the first year. And that's unfortunately why you see a ramping up in the second year, where we could see $1 million impact from the kids that we lost the last 2 years. So that's how that delays that impact. And the benefit to that is that we've been able to operate with a lower fund balance as a result of that, because it takes away some of the unknowns in the system. Because when you have a shock like that, where you take 12,600 times 133 away in 1 year, that's like, you have to have a really high fund balance to be able to absorb that, or figure out what is going to be reduced in that fiscal year. And so this is the challenge with the averaging being reduced, the number of years for the averaging being reduced, is that then it takes that bite and it increases it in the first year when you don't even know that it's going to be there. Yeah. Yeah.
I know I should probably know this answer, but 113 or 133 is what percentage of our anticipated enrollment?
We're roughly right under 5,000. So.
Okay.
Megan, if I do the numbers, it's like 2.7% decline. We were budgeting 4,975. I'm not counting Carbondale Community School, Two Rivers Community School, or Yampa. And so some of the numbers look different. Like when I'm giving numbers, you need to say it's including charters or not. But if we don't include the charters, we were budgeting 4,975. So if you take 133 of that, does that help?
What was our projected decline?
75 students.
So our projected decline was a third of what our actual decline is?
Well,
Yeah.
133 plus 75.
Yep.
Yeah. I did that. Right?
Okay.
Yeah, that's roughly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And and the 75 students really only accounts for the fact that the kindergartners coming in are about 75 students lower than the 12th graders going out. So if you've got more kids coming out of the system for whatever reason, then that's an additional decline. And that's what we did see.
Didn't our project that?
This was based upon, we used the demographers numbers. And so the demographers numbers were too high.
But they projected, for my school, right? They projected that the number of students in 9th grade would go down as they transition.
Yeah, they did. But then their estimation still did not include this 133.
Right. Third.
And And that shows you some of the, play in these numbers, because I mean, this is lives and people, like coming and going from different countries and all sorts of kinds of, legislative issues that are impacting it. It's really hard to get a handle on exactly what's going to happen from year to year on your enrollment. It's an issue that we've had at RE2, and I used to work there for many years. It's always challenging to get that, especially when you've got a changing environment for whatever reason, if it's politically, if it's if it's in like cost of living, all those kind of impacts. Yeah.
I'm so sorry. Another question. The 133 students, do we know how those students that like decline in enrollment, like what subgroups we're seeing it from? Because I know that different subpopulations impact funding differently. Like I assume my emerging bilingual population is much lower than we anticipated. And so then that would not only impact my general FTE, but the FTE of my CLDE department, et cetera.
Great question, Megan. I'm sitting next to Nancy Deaver, who's our student data person. So we're actually looking at some October count numbers. Nancy literally submitted our October count yesterday. And so it was dramatic. Grab Nancy during a break. And so we're going to present a lot of that nuanced October count data to year over year with the breakdown, like kind of disaggregated of who are those kids, where specifically are we seeing trends. We won't actually have that till that's all validated, but it's on the agenda for the board's, the presentation to the board November 12th. So you can look for that board packet with all the updated October count data by whatever, the 8th or the 9th, when that board packet comes out. So that's when we'll actually have, Megan, those hard numbers. And I want to name that the numbers we're kicking around, the 133.75, those are all budgeted numbers. So they're not actually like we're comparing actual to budgeted. Nancy and I are looking at this, and the actual like kids in seats year over year from last year shows us a drop of 221. So it's just an interesting, we're working with kind of the reality and then the reality of what we budgeted for. So they're actually kind of two different things until we get the money from the state, which is when kind of the rubber hits the road. Does that make sense a little bit? So I would say stay tuned for the actual specific counts, Megan, for that November board update. Does that help? Great. Other questions? Okay, let's do like a super shift because we're gonna do a little bit of history. And this will be really new to folks who are new to interest-based bargaining. Classifieds had really no process, and so has just been a kind of a secondary beneficiary of this process or this historic certified interest-based bargaining solution. And one of the things, so what we were tasked, and we being basically Christy, Amy, and I tasked with at the end of IBB last year, was really revisiting this solution that came from the early 2000s called Fair Share. And so what's interesting and what we'll lay out is a proposal for a new solution for this historic solution, which doesn't really work in a declining enrollment context. And so want to propose for this group this solution of kind of a Fair Share 2.0, which is really our effort was to come up with a solution that addressed the same interests that formed this formula, and then have conversations through our monthly leadership teams through this kickoff to see if this 2.0 will work for us. And it's much more of a process versus what historically was an algebraic formula. So want to share with you this proposal. Again, your leadership team's labor management committee for certified has already looked at this. 4x3 for classified has already looked through this, and the affiliated calendar. But I want to take this group through it in terms of where we were, what the interests were, why it doesn't quite work with the current situation, and then a proposal of where we go. So Also want to let you know that we got an incredible amount of help on the historical context and on the proposal from Shannon Pelland, who was part of the original solution and helped develop this. So Shannon was met with Amy and Christy and I through the summer as we developed this and helped refine it. So for those of you who don't know, Fair Share was an IBB solution that was launched during a really tricky financial time in Roaring Fork schools. Trust was really low, transparency was low, financial mismanagement had occurred, and the new CFO, who was Shannon at the time, helped construct this solution to address these critical interests. Teachers and staff should get their fair share of revenue increases annually in salaries and benefits. And staff salaries, benefits, and compensation packages should be a district priority. Those were things that that staff were not feeling at the time. It was basically what Fair Share was, a simplified calculation that allocated a portion of new dollars to teacher salaries and benefits. It was a target for budgets. And what's interesting about it, it worked retroactively, meaning that in a current year, if specific conditions were met, and Shannon explained to this, that was typically a fund balance reserve of 10%, student enrollment numbers, there were some kind of checkpoints, then a portion of new money would be infused into current salary schedules, and all staff would receive retroactive pay for the current year. Shannon also shared with us that Fair Share was suspended for many years when there were state budget cuts and when we didn't meet those conditions. What's tricky and what we found, especially last year, if you guys remember, even the 24-25 budget assumed increasing enrollment. And that was part of one of the many complications we were in a year ago. What's troubling is that the Fair Share is based on a portion of new monies. When you have declining enrollment, your overall new monies, there aren't new monies because your revenue is going down. And so when we have declining revenue each year, there aren't those dollars. Additionally, the state funding formula has increased complexity. So there used to be other funding streams that could be utilized for facilities, for strategic plans, for other purposes in the district that were like the Secure Rural Schools Fund was separate, but now a lot of those things have been baked into the school funding formula, which further complicates the historic Fair Share calculation. So the conclusion that we've come to in what we were living last year is that it doesn't work during periods of declining in funding. And given the potential for declining funding, declining enrollment moving forward, we have to have a new mechanism to ensure that staff are getting their fair share when there are increase in dollars or when we have that funding. So here's our proposal. In order to address the same interests that initially created the Fair Share Agreement, remember it was two things: teachers and staff getting proportional share in increases in increased revenues, and that staff compensation is a district priority. Here's the proposal. And what this would look like is what we're proposing is a financial transparency summit in February that would achieve the following outcomes. First, all IBB representatives would receive a thorough update on the outcomes of the prior year audit and any implications on the current year budget. So we would know the kind of how did we end the previous year? Then we would receive a thorough update on the current year Q2 financials to understand how the current year is going and how we're managing budget variances. Then we would get an update on the forecast from the state level, what conversations are happening. We'd be able to talk about Roaring Fork School District enrollment trends. And what we'd be able to do with those three updates and information is identify if there are favorable variances in the general fund balance. We would make sure that all IBB representatives understand how and why variances exist. A variance is like, there's more money than we thought, or we're in a deficit. We've overspent. So everybody would understand how and why they exist. If the variances, if they are one-time things that we can solve, or if they're going to be recurring, either additional monies or recurring losses. Then we'll understand the rationale behind understanding if there are favorable variances and we feel like we're unable to allocate them to staff salaries, then we'll talk through that. And so we'll be able to, for example, an example we have here is if we anticipate high increases in utilities, if we have a roof fall in and we say, yeah, there's there's $1 million favorable variance because of a nice audit, because we're managing our current dollars well and the state budget is stable, and Sopras's roof just fell in and we don't have the capital budget, then that's where that money is going to have to go. So we would talk through those things. So what we would go through in this summit is this thought process. If they're not, and where we would land, if they're not favorable variances, then we'd be unable to allocate additional unbudgeted dollars to staff salaries, much like in years when fair share just didn't work because there weren't the dollars. On the other hand, if we can allocate, if let's say there are favorable fund balances, the audit came out great. We actually ended up with an extra $1 million in 24-25 that we didn't anticipate having. And we can allocate those to staff salaries. Then what we talk through as a team is that one-time dollars that just happened because we budgeted well, or is it recurring? Is it the kind of savings that we've identified? Oh no, we're going to have that $1 million moving forward. So what we'll do is we'll walk through that. If it's one time, then we'll talk through how do we as IBB teams appropriately allocate that money to certified to classified, and then let the salary teams identify how we do bonuses, right? A one-time favorable variance can go into an immediate bonus. Whereas if it's a recurring benefit, then we talk through how we're going to invest that money in totally changing salary schedules. And that would be the work of our salary teams who have already identified priorities and issues in our salary schedules. So it would be a bit of a decision tree. As we all know, the health insurance collaborative solution team's got to insert at some point in there and let us know, hey, how's health insurance going to impact this favorable or unfavorable variance? How's that going to play into that? So we have to take that into consideration. But ideally what we're doing is looking through this thought process for favorable variances, identifying if they're recurring or not recurring, identifying if we can infuse them immediately in terms of bonuses or structurally in terms of salary schedule changes, and have then our straw committees design those solutions to invest dollars. That's a lot. I'm going to jump to this flow chart and Christy's going to like re-explain it.
that's
if you have questions.
Yeah, no, that sounds good. I just wanted to summarize this by saying one thing is that this particular way of handling things is going to provide a lot of additional information and transparency around the district's finances, where it's going to equip you guys to understand where the district's at and all of the, the important situations and things going on that'll really develop hopefully a better understanding for everybody, a better trust and transparency, and ability for people to ask really good questions and be thoroughly educated on the district's finances. So that's one of the hopes and outcomes of this, is because these are challenging questions and situations, and school districts are probably the most complicated organization you can run financially. So it takes a lot to really dive into certain questions and making sure people understand stuff. So in creating this, what I did is I said, okay, so here's the review points: the prior year audit, the current year Q2 financials, and the next year forecast. So I broke it out into two parts. The one part is the looking backwards and looking at current. Okay, those kind of two that we would go through at the February summit. Are we looking at the audit and the current year and prior year? Are they generally favorable or unfavorable? Those two items. And if they're favorable, then we'd look at why. Is it recurring or one-time funding? And reviewing the proposed reallocation of those funds, if there are funds available. Okay. And if the reallocation is to staff salaries, then we look about options of one-time bonuses versus investments in salary schedules in the future. And this is where this committee would be very thoroughly involved in those decisions. And if the reallocation is not to staff, then we really need to discuss the details of what's going on and really have some deep conversation on that direction. Okay. So, and if the variances are unfavorable, then review it and look at how we're looking to solve it. And for the overages, and we're not able to allocate additional dollars for staff in that situation, obviously, because we don't have any funding. So that's really kind of more straightforward direction there. For obvious reasons, there's no money. Then we look at next year's forecast, and this is a lot of work too for this committee. So this is a whole nother discussion, is looking at the major changes, looking into the future and where we have additional funding available or not. Well, how much of that funding is available for salaries? Is it recurring? Is it one time? And so there's a lot of questions we need to address here. But the first question that we would need to identify is determining the money available for staff raises. And that would involve usually like looking at different financial statements and also just a general summary of like where the funding needs to go, what is going on in the district's finances, and what is available for staff raises and benefits and why. And then looking at that, if it's recurring or one time, like I talked about, determining the split between salaries and other benefits such as health insurance. We've got the Collaborative Solutions Health Insurance Committee that would be a part of that. That's definitely a part of that whole discussion about what that split would look like being, and using compensation targets to allocate the funds to staff. So there's lots of targets and things that this group uses, like the scattergrams, like different districts, like all of these other, what is the current market for all these positions and all those kind of data points. And that's where we get those targets from. And then if the money is decided to be allocated to particular employee groups, then that's where you go into some breakouts for straw committees and design solutions for different salary schedules and how to address those issues. Okay, so that's generally it. So now I think that's it on this one. Yeah. Yep. So questions now on this. Yeah.
I think
Can you want to, is it on? Okay.
I'll try my best. So it's clear there's been so much going into this from the summer, and this seems like a really thoughtful direction. I'm new to IBB this year, and I just want to make sure I'm aligning and understanding what's happening. So from Rusty's presentation and time with us, my understanding currently is that we begin with stories and interest before we get into options and how. Can you clarify if this is intended as a proposed solution, or and there's opportunities to explore the underlying interests and perspectives first, or how do we envision this fitting into that process?
Great question. I would say that this was designed out. I mean, this was designed outside the solution design process of IBB. And the reason for that was because we needed a process to drive this work this year. And so where this would fit in, and I think this is a way, and y'all who've been part of IBB and Fair Share jump in. Fair Share was a calculation that was that typically and historically became part of the IBB process. So what would happen was the salary committees, because I don't know that we've ever had worked without a salary straw committee or subgroup. That committee would be working with numbers that were produced through the Fair Share calculation. And so we need to be able to have some sort of numbers to bring to that work. And so that's why it was designed the way it was. I mean, we could certainly talk through and revisit the how of this. Our proposal is to bring it forward. We've done one feedback cycle with leadership IBB teams. This is a second. I think we felt urgency to get something done, and we're tasked with coming up with a solution through the summer. We could take it through the IBB process if we wanted to dig back in. I think what we heard was come forward with something and let's run it through and see how it goes. But yeah, it was developed outside the traditional straw committee solution process.
What kind of feedback or information are you hoping for today? Or is there a timeline? Because there's a lot to process.
Would say it's this. It's can we continue to discuss this to get clear on it? I think this work kind of an awareness and building understanding phase with it. So I would say our next steps on this are, can we have further discussion with our IBB teams, through those meetings? If folks have an interest to lean into this and really dig in further, I think that's something we could lift up when we start to tell story and talk about interest. And then I think that it's really about working with our IBB leadership teams to walk through this process. You know, those are the teams that are responsible for the work at large and how we do this work and how we navigate agreements and outcomes. And so our proposal is that then we continue to refine this through those groups, feedback cycles with our teams, and that we pilot this in this school year and then figure out how we can strengthen it. Does that help?
I would love to come back to some of the timelines, especially when you say pilot something this school year, just so that I can gain familiarity and we can all kind of understand. I know the IBB process is slow and we have some enthusiasm and so much work coming from your side. I'm wondering if there's an off-ramp for this particular conversation today and we can revisit it another time so that we can, or is that like a cheeky no, Jean question?
My first thought on that with that's what, if this becomes something that we want to off ramp and dig into and tackle it as an interest within certified IBB or classified IBB, we would eddy out. And so for certified, that would mean this afternoon. And if we lift this up and say, hey, we have an interest in revisiting this, we're not actually comfortable with moving forward. And we're willing to take a group to step aside and work on it. I think that's something that we could work through through that process. Does that sound right to folks? Lindsay's, Autumn, you've had your, let's go Autumn and then to Lindsay.
Yeah, so I've had my card up for a while because it feels very weird to have a solution presented especially when we just had Rusty's training. I guess I'm very confused. A lot of information was just thrown at us. That's very important information, and I'm not discrediting the work that this group has done. And clearly there's an interest that we need to look at this, but asking us to look over 6 slides of information very quickly and make a decision does not seem like maybe that's in the best interest of this process that works through this really digging in and looking at all of this stuff. And so I'm very confused as to why this is being brought to us as a proposal when we haven't even started to share interest or stories yet.
I'll just respond really quick, Autumn. I totally appreciate that push, and would say this is what came out of LMC last spring, was that there was a task for us to bring this forward in the fall. And so we shared this with LMC, I think August, September, to talk through and say, hey, is everybody comfortable with us bringing it to today? So this process has been designed through Labor Management Committee, and we knew that we would get to this moment and go, are we on the right track or are we not? And that we could talk through it as an interest through the process if we need to. Let's go Lindsay and then Stephanie.
I think.
And then Brandon, sorry. I'm sorry, are you watching, Amy? Thank you. Sorry.
I'm trying to watch, I think, Carb and Lindsay and Stephanie.
I think, I think the same flag went up in my head. And I guess like what I'm seeing here is that you're not actually proposing a solution, you're proposing a process. I don't know if I'm right about that. And it seems like the process is well thought out. The thing that I think is that this idea is not separate from some of the other interests that we've been thinking about. For example, I'll just give one example, which is like this kind of assumes that all other things being equal, we'll see if we have extra money to put into salary schedules, and then we'll determine what to do with that money. But I don't think all other things are equal in the sense that in the when I look at this process, I don't see the question of like, are all the current programs and positions that we're funding necessary? Like, this is kind of assuming that we're going to keep everything the same and then see if there's any money left over. But if our student enrollment is shrinking, and that means like the number of students, then eventually the number of teachers, then shouldn't also like the programming and the size of the district office and all of that be shrinking? And that doesn't seem to be accounted for in this process. So like I actually appreciate the work, and I do remember how you all were tasked with that. And so I don't think it's inappropriate to bring it forward. I just I think there probably does need to be a little moment of evaluation of this process before, like, you know, with consideration of those other things.
Someone else to add. This one works. Yeah, Adam, I appreciate that. So this is Lindsay DeFreitas. I sit on the Labor Management Committee, and just as a quick reminder, the role of that committee, which is still pretty new and is doing its best to sort of play the right role in this conversation without overstepping any of the IBB processes, is to make sure for certified staff specifically that the implementation of the collective bargaining agreement is being done transparency and with fidelity through the decisions being made at the school district operationally, and as much as possible to make sure that the board and our policies are managing with that in mind. So just as a quick snapshot of what LMC, Labor Management Committee, means, that's it. We're trying to translate this collective bargaining agreement, the teachers union contract, into reality day to day. And we were tasked with this idea of removing a sense of surprises about the amount of financial money in this fair share concept that would be available throughout the process. So I think one of the concerns I heard loud and clear last year sitting in some of these rooms was, well, we didn't know when we were going to even know how much money there was to talk about. And so I think what Dr. Cole has tried to do here, and Chief Chicoine as well, is to say, when are we going to know those numbers? So that as you all move through interests and as you're considering, you're not just sort of waiting until there's a bomb dropped. At least this is the understanding that I have. And Dr. Cole, please correct me if I'm not quite getting this right. But it's more, this is our timeline and this is the process. I really appreciate the push, Adam, especially that there are other factors. And I think I would be interested in knowing in this sort of flow chart, where would those push in? Because again, this isn't the number. This isn't the decision. It's not even an interest. My understanding and my hope is that it is a timeline and a structure so that you all are not waiting and wondering if this decision's already been made and that it's just going to come at you sideways. And if that's not how it's being communicated, or you feel like it's counter to that, I'm happy to hear it. And I think your question about how do we find out more about finances and how do we push on those places we don't feel involved? I think this is our attempt to be transparent about when we can make those decisions and when you're going to see them again. But I think if you want to give feedback about what's missing in the flowchart, I think that's super valuable, and that's really appreciated that you're taking the time to engage with it. I understand that this feels out of context in the IBB process because we haven't actually started that yet. We wanted to offer this up as a way of answering the requests that were made previously. So I'll shut up now. Thanks.
Yeah, I think Brandon was up first, but. Oh, okay. I'm having a hard time keeping track. Brandon?
I have 2 points. I think an assumption we are overlooking is, do we want to continue with fair share? I think that's been assumed. So there is opportunity if fair share 2.0 is problematic. IBB committees could say, we want to start at step 0 again on fair share. So I just want to throw that out there. The other point was, I would ask for more clarity as we go into this process as how we determine what financial expenses are prioritized. It ties to large capital projects, operational cost. I think IBB teams will need additional guidance as to how we prioritize salaries against all those things. And so I'm hoping that as I think moving this to the IBB groups for further discussion is important, but I think they're going to need that clarity, or at least the task of determining where salaries fall against other expenses across the district.
Okay. I sat in with Anna for this LMC meeting in August. It was Miles, myself, Lindsay, Amy, Anna, Christy, and we actually pushed back Anna. We said we weren't comfortable unless this came to IBB. That was a big thing. And that was before we had Charlie as president. And so I actually thought that that would be an interest that your group would actually bring to IBB this year to work through. So I, like Autumn, a little taken aback that it's fully developed. When we met in August, it was definitely just in the, rough draft, chicken scratch kind of startings, like we've had these conversations. So I would just like to put that clarification in the room from the LMC person who sat in there, and Miles can't be with us today. Secondly, I do have some concerns. This feels very top down. It feels very like you're coming to us and this is this. I don't see a lot of place in this flow chart with our voice back into it. We often come with our numbers, our research, our data, our work from CEA on things that they're seeing or hearing, and I don't see that voice anywhere in this process either. So if we were going to proceed with 2.0, I do think that IBBs need to really look at it and have some very, in-depth conversations about those kind of things.
First.
So two things. Oh, I'm Charlie DeFord from Lemon Springs High School. The first is just look at the flow chart. And this dovetails with what Stephanie is saying. You can see exactly where teacher salary interests fall. It's the last decision in the actual flow chart. After all the other budgetary, and I think this actually reinforces what Brandon is kind of highlighting, all the other budgetary concerns are met first, and then teacher salaries kind of increasing teacher salaries becomes a consideration. The second is about the definition of teacher. I know what it meant in 1997 when Shannon created this, but I know that that is an umbrella term that actually kind of covers a whole host of different positions in the district, and that's not clarified in here.
Hi, I'm Brent Hayes from Basalt High School. And I just was curious about some of the numbers that I was writing down just from the shortfall. So 133 students lost beyond the budgeted 75. That's correct. So the 312,000 roughly dollars of the original 75, was that covered from contingency money from last year, or how was that covered? Because if I do the 208 total students time our 4,000, whatever, we get up to $866,000 shortfall.
Right now.
The math was not mathing. I just was looking for clarification.
No, that's wonderful. Yeah, just that comes back again to the student averaging. So when we reduced the 75 students as a part of the initial budget, that was included in the $9 million that was reduced from the prior year to get to a balanced budget for 25-26. That's where that money came from. And we had a 4-year averaging. So when you're looking at reducing 75 kids, you get the hit of that 75 kids, like pretty much a quarter of that per year, but it's not quite that same math because you have increases and decreases for 3 other years, right? So that's where that money came in. And then looking at the 550,000, that was the reduction for this year. We have not yet determined where that is going to come from. We need our audit results first. to see if we have some one-time monies available to be able to cover that. And so that's something that we're going to still need to work on. But the 550,000 comes from that averaging of over 4 years of those students. Okay. Okay. Does that help? Okay. You're quite welcome. Okay.
And
oh, you got it. Okay. I got it.
okay, thank you. Yeah, I'm right.
I am hearing a lot of details being asked about, and I want to try and summarize kind of the two big issues I'm hearing. And one is, what is our fair share process look like in the long-term future? And the other one is, what is our process for this year? And I don't know if it serves us right now to dive into like the different parts of this flow chart and what we like and what we don't like, but maybe think more broadly about what can we accomplish this morning while we have all of these people here, 5 of us from CRES, go CRES. And Maddie's got to go do lunch soon. But so my summary of the two questions, one is, what does our process look like for this year, including how are we going to look at this and review this? And the other is, one of our priorities for this year is the fair share process going forward long term. But I don't know if I'm summarizing that right.
And I know the one thing I want to say is that really the intent is to I mean, obviously looking at the goals of the organization is really to try to still focus on how we increase salaries. I mean, and so the way that if it's coming across the way that that teacher salaries or salaries are looking at the last, that isn't the intent. I just want you guys to realize that the intent is to get to transparency, that there's a lot of things that you really can't identify in a very small flow chart that we're going to need to talk about. And those things are going to be inclusive of, you know, like, well, why is this being prioritized over this? I really don't understand that. That's a tough conversation. There's a lot of tough conversation with transparency. I mean, just because, you know, there's recommendations being put out there, the recommendations are put out there just for efficiency. But then I mean, I still have the very important job of being able to explain this in a way that everybody understands. And if it doesn't feel right, we have to have more conversation. It isn't something that take it or leave it, too bad, so sad. That is definitely not any of the way that I operate as an individual. And I know Dr. Cole is the same and the board is the same, because we have this goal and we're really serious about our staff salaries. That's why we're looking at going for a mill levy. I mean, when we were running out of money, when we saw this like projection slide about like all this terrible news on the finances, from health insurance to lower enrollment to funding cliff at the state to all these other funding cliffs internally, we're like, we've got to do something about this so that we have some solutions for our staff that is reasonable, because we also understand that you guys are taking hits too, because, you know, the cost of living doesn't continue to decline as we have issues and the state has issues with their funding. So I really want to just note that that's the intent that we come about with this. And I really hope that we take some time, take the time, whatever time is needed, to come together as a team to see what is going to work. Because the thing that I want to try to avoid, if at all possible, is to get stuck in the mud for this year. Because I really thought last year we got a little stuck in the mud because we really didn't have a very clear process with this fair share. Everybody knew it didn't work. And it's like, you can't make a broken system work in a declining enrollment perspective. And so this is our best intent to try to get a good starting point for this year so we don't get stuck in the mud. And I just really encourage the continued conversation that we can get to where we all need to be for salaries.
Brandon, are you?
My computer because it's streaming. You know, I would say one of the things that I'm reflecting on and hearing the frustration around, where's the input on these steps? Where's the voice of staff in these components? Where do we talk about other priorities that things are being spent? Where do we talk about our different programs or service lines? Are we spending those correctly? I think those are all exactly the same kind of questions we should have had when someone threw a fair share formula on the board and said, this is the dollars. Because I also think that algebraic formula that we used in the past also did not include input on the steps, any sort of staff teacher voice. It didn't include a discussion of other priorities, and also didn't talk about, are we spending in other areas? It just looked at new money and took a portion of that. And so I do think that the pushback on this is absolutely fair. And I would have said, yeah, I felt the same way about the formula. Like and again, I saw it once. I saw it once with a different CEO or CFO when we thought we had more money. We thought numbers of kids were going up. And it was a really pretty calculation that made us feel really good. And we went and built some really great salary schedules with it. And I would have said all those things were still true, that there was no input, there was no teacher voice. We didn't talk about other priorities that the district was spending on. And we didn't talk about other positions and staffing where other money was going. And so I actually think that those issues are part of the fair share concept at large. And I would love to unpack that. We were tasked with coming up with something different than the algebraic formula, that when we have declining enrollment and not a lot of increases at the state level is just going to give us a negative number. And so I agree that this does not address any of those issues at all. But what I heard last year was, okay, well, then what do you have instead of an algebraic formula? How are you going to do it? And so this was that first attempt at coming up with something that's not a negative algebraic formula, but could actually walk us through that. But I agree. I don't think it tackles any of those issues. And so happy to dig in, because I think those are other interests. Why are we spending money on different things? Can we talk about that? Are our dollars going to things that matter? I think those are important interests, but this was simply trying to adjust an algebraic formula that was coming up negative. So I don't know, so I do think that it's worth us leaning into this as an interest when we break out, right? And in terms of process, what that would look like is certified this afternoon. We'll have time to caucus. We can structure this as an interest. We can form a subcommittee if we all agree to it, to say, let's unpack this and rebuild. And so I think that's totally fair. And I think some story around it would really matter. But I do think, I agree that this was trying to mimic something that was flawed already, and came up with the same flaws because we weren't necessarily trying to solve for those things. Then I would say classified, what that would show up as is us bringing that interest to classified and also seeing if there's a straw committee. And we don't meet for that meeting until December. Amy, is that right? November? Okay. Yeah, so that's what I would say we go with it and we hold on to the concerns and questions, because I agree, it doesn't address any of that.
I'm trying.
I've had to do it before. It's very hard. So you're doing a great job. I guess just a process check, like clearly this is an interest, so we should take this and we should move on. Like, I feel like we all have a lot to say. I want to give it the IBB conversation and have that space to ask questions. I think Brandon brings up a very good point. Is this even what we want to do moving forward? We need to hold space for that. This does not seem like the place to do that right now.
Can I try to summarize what I just heard from you two? Please. Let me get my DJ voice. So maintain a sure consistency. We're almost near 11 a.m. At least it's not the 2 p.m. slump. I'm hearing your proposal to continue with the current IBB processes as originally planned, because we know it's super powerful, it's super aligned, and long term, like, we can get all of our goals and be a lot more successful and feel really connected with the results of that process. And once we've established stories and interests, we can take really important elements of this proposal. We're starting to explore options and things like that in a really detailed, because we'll have established interests and sort of, instead of like sort of floating in the void. And talk about variances. It makes me think about cost models, and grab this business, and we can have a really intentional, focused conversation, but just within the framework of IBB, so that we can keep those relationships really strong. Just like Rusty said, those are just as important as the content, even if it might be a little bit less quick as this timeline proposes. Is that okay?
Yeah.
I saw lots of
We're transitioning to health insurance. It's been almost a year since we have made the pivot from self-insurance to CEBT. Christy will tell you that the long-term effects of closing out self-insurance, they are just wrapping up right now. So that was the whole thing. As we were working through the transition last year, a health insurance collaborative solutions team was formed. If you are currently on that team, will you please raise your hand? There are a lot of people here. A lot of folks on the health insurance team, and this is some of the work that we're doing right now. Better understanding our benefits, reviewing data, including usage and costs that inform our insurance rates and inform our insurance rate increases. If we're working within this estimated increase of 8 to 15%, we of course want to keep it as close to 8% as possible. And we can do that by being smart consumers of our benefits and smart deciders when it's time to sign up during open enrollment. So I'm hoping that some members of that team can inform colleagues about cost savings opportunities. At some point this year, I would like to review our supplemental insurance options. Right now that's MetLife. In the past, it was American Fidelity. I think it would be smart to sort of review what our options are there. And then our task is to recommend insurance options to all IBB groups by the February Financial Summit. And by options, they're sort of given to us by CEBT. I assume it will be some sort of PPO plan. We'll choose the least expensive that we're able to qualify for. I assume we'll have a high deductible plan. And then there could be one other thing on the table. And as all of this is happening, we are hoping to continue to learn about and advocate for more cost-efficient options. And it has come to our attention. And Eric, I don't know if you know more about this, that CEA is working on this on a statewide level.
Yeah, thanks. So the simple answer is yes. There is an attempt right now to create a legislative fix and a legislative, like an organization of all of the school districts statewide into one collective to help reduce costs and premiums and to create a little more consistency. And so we're working with legislators currently to accomplish that. And I know we've reached out to have a meeting here to try and get buy-in from that.
So that's a process that's happening on the side as we continue to get the most value that we can out of our CEBT benefits. Any questions about health insurance? Okay, then we're going to move on to this proposed calendar. It's really like our combined IBB proposed calendar timeline. I do appreciate both groups being here together so that we can be learning together. In August, we set the schedule, and then you can see that some leadership teams have been meeting, classified. I know you all have set your survey out and analyzed the results, and you're ready to be working this afternoon with that. Classified, I think the survey has started making the rounds, and we're going to continue to push it. We're on a little delayed timeline because we'll meet together again at the beginning of December. So that is happening. We're here at our training on October 30th. So in November, we know that salary subcommittees are going to meet. That's an assumed subcommittee and salary and benefits. The health insurance team will continue meeting. Classified will kick off in December. And then the finance summit will be happening in February. Again, we'll be all together because that will allow us to be getting the same information at the same time. We have a goal to have bargaining completed by March, and there is an if then in there. We must have our health insurance plans and revised salary schedules our goal is by the Thursday before spring break. If we get to a place where retroactive salary adjustments are possible, that will happen in April and probably spread over 2 months. So maybe will happen in April and May to help our 2-person payroll department get that done. And the board presentation will happen then. Questions about our IBB calendar? Okay.
Okay. When you say for April and May, if retroactive salary adjustments or bonuses are possible spread over 2 months to balance workload, I'm uncertain on the balance workload.
For example, if both certified staff and classified staff receive retroactive pay increases, the certified might happen in April and then the classified might happen in May. The total dollar amount would be the same, but it would allow the payroll department to accomplish this over 2 months.
I thought you meant you were spreading the retroactive pay over 2 months, but you mean you're going to do it 1 month for one group and 1 month for
Staggered implementation.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Okay, last update. We and some of y'all know this already, some of you are on the team. We have pulled together an exploratory committee, a district exploratory committee to explore a mill levy override. Our current thinking is around 2026. Due to a short opportunity of time to go back to our voters. Some of you who were around in 2021 might be asking, like, how can we do this? I thought we maxed out. We did. Last year, the legislature took the total program formula. This is, again, another calculation that the state uses to figure out how much money is the per pupil funding for each district. And if you remember, they take a baseline and then they have all these adjustments. They have a number of free and reduced lunch. There's a rural schools. There's a cost of living factor. And then they run that number through. And that's why districts have different per pupil numbers. What the state legislature did was they took the cost of living factor and capped it. So they dropped it. So there were a couple districts that were benefiting in our total program fund by because we live in a high cost of living district. We're one of them. So what that did was immediately reduce the amount of revenue we would be able to raise because they weren't taking into account the full issues around cost of living in our valley. So what the legislature did was open up a window of short time that we could go back to our voters to offset that cap to push an additional mill levy. So we have a couple years that we could go back to try to recoup some of that revenue on the backs of taxpayers, to be quite honest. And we still think this is a really important, meaningful effort to try to generate revenue. And so the goal of this would be very similar to the 2021 mill levy override to increase staff salaries, address staff recruitment retention efforts. The committee has kind of confirmed that that would be the purpose that we would recommend to the board of a potential mill levy override, an additional one. You can see that all of our IBB teams are represented on that mill levy override committee. We'll continue to share information as we work. This is at this moment simply an exploratory committee making a decision whether to bring a recommendation to the board. If that happens, that typically happens like in the summer. And then once the board approves ballot language and to put something on a ballot, then the committee's kind of done. And then groups outside the district might start a campaign. So many of you remember this from 2021, but that's the way this work would happen. I wonder, Christy, if you could talk about the scope of what we think this could increase in terms of dollars. And And then if there's any questions on this, happy to talk through, but I would say basically we see this as probably the next best window to increase revenue, and have a significant impact on staff salaries.
Okay, it's a little bit nuanced as far as how much money this would generate for the district. If you're looking at the total dollars that would need to be paid by taxpayers, it would be close to 5.5 million. And that's at our 24-25 number of students. So obviously, as our number of students drops, so will our potentially, our total program funding, because it's a total of 30% of our total program funding is our maximum. And that's what we believe the ballot language is going to state, is that we're going to try to maximize all the remainder of our total program funding, or all of our mill levy override, so that we can be capped to the top. Right now, there's this little issue we've got with our current mill levy overrides where we tried to add an inflationary adjustment, but there's still a difference there, a little difference. So we're going to try to get it and keep it at that 30% rate. So when we take that 5.5 million and reduce that for what we could lose in the number of students, then it could be closer to 4.75 million. And then we're going to have to share that with our internal charter schools also. So we're probably looking at the range of about 4.25 to 4.5 at the maximum of what we're looking at right now. But I mean, it's going to be adjusted as our total program funding adjusts. Okay. So it's nuanced. I know that I'm trying to give you like how that is so that you guys can follow that, if that makes sense. Because I thought about just giving a number, but then I don't want to give you guys just a super low number. And then, well, why are we collecting this 5.5 million, from the taxpayers? Where is the rest of the money going? But it's just so you can see the full picture.
Okay. Shall we keep rolling?
You should do that, but I know we can't stop by beyond.
I think we're ready to wrap with questions for the whole group. Certified, if you have your own questions, we can wait until we're together. But do we have any questions for the whole group? Okay, I think we're good. You all, thank you so much for being here. Classified, sorry for keeping you late. We're really grateful that you were able to join us.
Thank you.